Are unions holding the Labour Party back? Exploring the tensions in modern UK politics. Welcome to Mark and Pete, two blokes with half an opinion. Here's a thought.
Busy bodies. All the heads of trade unions form a busy body, which have a hand in negotiating workers' pay. But they soon end up in arms if conditions are shoddy when their feet get up and walk away. Well, negotiations, my word. How many people who are listeners are members of unions? Now, interestingly, in the United Kingdom, union membership as a proportion of employees has actually even fallen. The latest statistics state that 32.4% in the mid to late 90s compared to 22% in the 2020s is a good figure just to indicate the decline in unions. However, what we have seen is an increase in strikes. Well, Mr. Pete, I ask you, do you think the unions are getting too big for their boots?
Well, Mr. Mark, what we've been seeing is that the Labour Party is still influenced by unions, possibly through the past links with them. The links with them in terms of donations, though, possibly being a greater motive to have to listen to them. And they do have influence, of course, over voting of their members to vote, although they don't have a block vote in the general election, so that's not something that directly happens, but they do have influence. Just harking back, or talking about block votes, to when it used to be the case back in the day that before 2014 that unions would have a block vote in voting for the next leader of the Labour Party. Well, so I think that they have they do have a lot of influence because of all that. They used to have more, so I think Labour's in a better position now. But I do think they have a lot of influence, which can be unhelpful for a government who wants to be able to forge its own way ahead. So our title was, "Are the unions holding the Labour Party back?" And it could well be, as to whether that's without commenting that's a good thing. I think it could well be that they will do that. They seem to be set on having strikes or withholding their labour, making a fuss, even though my understanding is that the government has made commitments to some of their major unions that they're going to meet their demands. Isn't that right? Is that what you've heard?
Well, I think this is the point that where we don't know where we stand with half of these people. So yes. Look, I mean, trade unions have been around a long, long time. And we've seen that one of the major trade unions, certainly in the United Kingdom, is ASLEF. That's the Associated Society of Locomotive Engineers and Firemen. Yes. A snappy title, but nevertheless, it's not that snappy when it comes to the service. We've seen that they've withdrawn their service several times. In fact, those poor people who have tried to get to either London or other parts of the country simply on the basis that they've been standing at a platform going nowhere. Yes, the trains have not been running. And this is because over basically workers' pay and rights. Now, the interesting thing is, when we look back in history, there should be a lesson, isn't there? So, Clergyman Pete, 1833, that's a good year. And why? Yes, the Tolpuddle Martyrs. Well, these were 6 men from the village of Tolpuddle who founded the Friendly Society of Agricultural Labourers as a friendly group gathering to protest against the gradual lowering of agricultural wages. Well, you might say that obviously you need to uphold fairness, workers' rights, workers' conditions. What was interesting in summary, that at the time, the year later, magistrates of the local landowner and Tolpuddle basically actually wrote to the Home Secretary, Lord Melbourne, remember him, folks, to complain about the union. In the end, this was a recommendation to invoke the Unlawful Oaths Act in 1797. Well, basically, our 6 little friends, were all tried together before Sir John Williams. And unfortunately, what happened was both the The judge and the jury found that the 6 men were guilty of swearing a secret oath and sentenced to transportation to Australia. So, look, we've seen that, well, in one way, it can sort of spawn a nation. However, the point being is that unions do hold a lot of weight, a clout. But this is where I have the issue. When you sign up to any job, any union, surely as part of your oath, it's a bit like a doctor, isn't it? You know, you have a Hippocratic oath to serve the patient. But if you're damaging that patient, or if you're damaging your customer, meaning let's take ASLEF, with those poor customers who've got virtually no choice and are going nowhere, and yet they're still paying their annual subscriptions to a train ticket, that can't be right, can it? Now, is that something that you in agreement with, that maybe actually that sometimes unions can go too far? What's your thoughts?
Yes, I do think unions can go too far. I think the basic idea of a union, that workers can get together collectively to have enough power to be able to negotiate terms, conditions, pay with their employer. That's the basic idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
But of course, that can work the other way, in that it can be the workers who are being exploited, but it can be the employer who's being coerced by his employees into doing things that are not good for the company. Now, if it's not good for the company, then there's two things. One is it may mean that the product, whatever it is that they produce, may not be as good as it should be, for various reasons. If people working too few hours, whatever it is, things might not be done right. But also, in the end, it rebounds back onto the people in the union, or maybe people who employ there who aren't in the union. Because what can happen then is that if they, for example, are paid too much, the whole company goes bust if it's a company. Now, if we're talking about a public sector union, then I guess different people tend to be the people who lose out. It tends to be the taxpayer who ends up paying people too much, if that is what happens. So, yeah, I can see that there needs to be a limit on their power. And if we look back to the 1980s, when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister in Britain, there had been a lot of problems with miners' unions extending their power, such that you had complaints over conditions, but also over mines closing, which of course mines do need to close if they're not making enough money. And what they were doing then was actually stopping people at other places, other mines, from working in what were called flying pickets, where you send people to go and stop people in another place from working. And that was, of course, outlawed. So these sort of restrictions curbed the power of the unions, and I think careful use of such laws are important. Otherwise, the unions can become too powerful. Unions, necessary evil, same as any sort of gathering of people together. You can get corruption, you can get misuse of power, but as long as you limit that power, I think we do need them. Otherwise, the employees are at a disadvantage with big companies, particularly, and certainly in the public sector when they're negotiating.
Yes, well, I agree that it's important for workers not to be exploited. Yes. We certainly saw. You and I obviously can only barely remember the Victorian period, but the fact of the matter is that some of the strongest unions are actually in the Nordic countries: Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden. Now they have the highest trade union density rates, and I suppose when you think of car manufacturers and just general discrete manufacturers who are producing products across a whole spectrum of goods that we use in society, the fact is that you probably you're under intense pressure day by day to work in some rather dull and dirty and dangerous places, and so obviously you want to be fairly paid, you want to be safe, so your union should be there to help you to make sure that your employer is upholding all of those standards. But nevertheless, if you're downing tools and your product isn't going out, or your service is not going into practice, that's a bad one, because you're right that somewhere down the line the public pays the cost in some way. But I suppose that when you think about government, I come back to that. Do you think that even the government follows standards? I mean, the government's upholding to many laws. And, if you take the UK government, it's not just adhering to UK law; it's adhering to EU laws even today, despite Brexit. So, should there even be the need for a union, or is it that just politicians are there to exploit?
I see what you mean. Well,
yes. Well, I can understand if you're an independent company, it's a different matter, isn't it? But if you're government-led, you should be constrained by laws anyway.
Yes, you should. Yes, but I think that it's good to have these constraints on such lawmakers as well. I don't see that as. I think that's important. If you look at the way that traditionally our country has been governed, you've had the legislative body, you've had the Houses of Parliament, you've as one source of power. Then you've got the legislative bodies, which are meant to judge whether laws are carried out correctly, and then you've got the government, which actually implements the laws, because that's the way it's done. So there's three branches of the government, and that's echoed more explicitly in the way that they're set up over in the United States of America land, where they have those three branches of government. But the reason that is deemed to work well, and I think that's great, is these different powers, if you like, balance against each other, so they have different levels of power. If you have something else, then that's good as well, something else that can put a constraint on that power. And there is something that's recognised in terms of politics, which is the press, a free press, which is, of course, not just newspapers, but TV, all the different independent media these days. And unions are another balance to the power. Yes. So I think that they are a good thing, but I think there need to be constraints. But then there need to be constraints on the constraints. The laws are put in place, the unions are then held in check. But members of the union have a vote into who represents them in Parliament, where the laws are made. So when the balance works out, basically, I don't know who said this. Maybe Mr. Mark, but. Someone once said that democracy is the worst possible system except all the others. Now, of course, but I mean, people say we're not a direct democracy. I understand that we're a representative democracy with a constitutional king. But we're a type of democracy, and I think that works when you have these balances of power. It's messy, but in the end, you do end up with something that is fairer than it would have been otherwise.
Yes. Now, the thing here is, if you are considering joining a union, you do have to consider one of the few, at least maybe 2 or 3 points, possibly. First of all, your income, part of your income, does actually go to union dues. So there is a sort of a levy. Yeah. The other side is you have less autonomy because you have to abide by the union rules. So it means that should you be, say, an individual who wants to sort of choose where you join or what you do, and etc., well, you have to conform. And the other one, of course, is that often it is perceived that the union rules may favour seniority, slowing advancement, maybe less opportunity for those capitalist rights that you might have in other places. But here's the other thing, of course, if you are called out on a strike, it could be that you could have a risk of unpaid stoppages of work, and that would mean that possibly you would lose some of your income rights. But yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see what our listeners think. Are they a member of unions, whether it be a nurses' union, teachers' union, maybe, or other? What do they think of it? Do you think it serves them best or not?
Yes, let us know. Just go to markandpete.com and make sure you're subscribed, and you can leave a comment on this and any episode. But for Mark and Pete, that's it for this week, and catch you next time.